Hey friends, this is day 23 of Russian all-out war against Ukraine. Today let's talk about what's happening with the stalemate on the battlefield and the dangerous moment we're in right now and the effect it will have on each side of the conflict and also the future of economics, business, and other important aspects of our lives. And by sides of conflict, I don't just mean Russia or Ukraine, I also mean United States, China, EU, NATO, even Israel and Turkey, because they're part of this conflict as well indirectly. So, as you know, the stalemate has been going on for about 7 days. Russia cannot advance on any of the three main directions it had started on. It actually had started with 7 directions, but now only remains 3. One is in the south around Kherson. Another is in the east, of course, where the temporary occupied territories are of Luhansk and Donetsk. Another is the north direction of Chernihiv, Zhytomyr, trying to come closer to Kiev. So time is not on the side of the Russians right now, because it looks like it's going to go to positional warfare, which means that both sides are entrenched where they are, and we're actually seeing Russians trying to entrench right now. They're digging trenches. But that's not good for Ukraine, because we know Ukrainians know the territory, they know what's what, and especially with the greenery and the vegetation that's going to bloom soon, Ukraine is going to have a much better advantage. So the longer this prolongs, the worse it is for Putin. So that's why we're seeing his press secretary Peskov, for example, saying that we're working hard, we're going to work overtime on the peace negotiations, but we're not seeing Ukraine showing the same kind of commitment. The reason they're saying that is because they need to end this fast, because the sooner they go to the negotiation table, the stronger their position will be. For Ukrainians, of course, it's a Sophie's choice, because yeah, we can prolong this, and we know that we're going to be winning, especially with the help that we're getting from the United States and Great Britain, especially with those anti-air complexes that's going to help us dominate in the sky, which was our weak point. But also with the cruelty that's going on in cities like Mariupol, which is being leveled to the ground, it's a trade-off. Are we willing to lose more civilian population? Are we willing to risk more scenarios like we're seeing in Mariupol, which is what's been happening in Aleppo, Syria, for example, where they just go into full terrorist mode and try to inflict as much damage on civilians as they can. Most experts I hear, they are saying that there's 2 big options. One main option for Putin is to go to the negotiations and try to settle some kind of a peace deal, which right now is not going to be favorable to him. But the longer he prolongs the war, the more damage he takes in troops and machinery, the less it's going to be the less strong position he's going to have at the negotiations. The other way he could go, which is right now is totally possible, is to do something crazy like a nuclear option, or they're calling it tactical nuclear strike, which means that he would try to strike either one of the NATO bases or Ukraine, and to say this is a warning shot, don't mess with me. Or do something like what's happening in Mariupol, where they're trying to destroy civilian targets, inflict as much damage on civilians as they can, as many deaths, to stop the war with their method of, I think the Russians are calling it escalate to de-escalate. So basically they're saying we're going to inflict so much damage, we're going to kill so many civilians that you're going to have to stop, which of course is something only Russia can do. So time is not on their side, and have these 2 options. And judging by how Western leaders are talking about it, it may be that the second option is more probable. And the reason I say that is because the day before yesterday, I think when President Biden was announcing his $800 million security package to Ukraine, he let something slip. He said it looks like we're going to have to brace for a long period of struggle, which which might not seem like much, but of course the intelligence in United States is a lot stronger. They know what's going on in Putin's bunker, and from various sources we do know that there's a struggle going on between Putin and the people that he has to listen to. They're not really his advisors, but they're people who, for example, finance his regime, who have other kinds of influences for him, and they're trying to convince him to stop the war and make a peace deal. But of course, him being a deranged lunatic, he doesn't want to do that because he will look like a loser, right? And as we talked about before, if he did go for the peace option, for the peace deal, he will need to reframe something that happened during the war as a victory and say, well, Russia, of course, is the victor here, which is, I think, a big part of the reason why they're trying to level Mariupol, is because they're taking that city, and that's where they think the Nazis are, or that's where their propaganda is messaging the Nazis are. For example, one of the volunteer battalions called Azov is defending Mariupol, and they are propagandizing that Azov is really the Nazis. So they had said one of the reasons they gave for shooting up the convoy of refugees that were coming out is because the fighters of Azov were trying to escape in civilian clothes, but what gave them away were like swastika tattoos on their necks and arms, and supposedly Russian army had recognized this and they started shooting at the Nazis. So the legend they're creating around Mariupol is that this is the core, the axis of neo-Nazis in Ukraine. So one interpretation of what's happening in Mariupol is that he's trying to take the city to be his victory, and that will give him an escape route for him to save face. So because the other option is much more grim. What we're also seeing is that Putin is totally using the nuclear threat for more and more reasons. So in the beginning, remember day 4, he put his nukes on high alert, saying, well, it looks like the West is gonna be the target because they're helping Ukraine. But now his reasons for using the tactical nuclear option, and tactical nuclear option means that they will hit one target either in NATO like Poland or in Ukraine as a preventive shot. So now they're saying, well, if Poland doesn't close their roads to the traffic of ammunition to Ukraine, we're going to consider that be part of war. So we're seeing that his rhetoric is becoming more and more closed. The Overton window for Putin closes, so which is all the more reason to deal with a nuclear threat now instead of trying to kick it down the road. So that's what's going on with that. So right now it's a dangerous moment because who knows what's gonna happen? Who knows what he's gonna choose? Nuclear option. There's also the possibility of chemical weapons. We're seeing that Russia is trying to create a theoretical base or justification for why they would use chemical weapons. They're saying that, well, we found American biolabs in Ukraine, and they've been training special animals that. It's a special kind of stupid that story is, but nevertheless we're seeing that they're trying to come up with an excuse why they would use a chemical weapon or a nuke. So let's see what's happening with that. China is being super shady because, as you remember, it was a day before yesterday, the consulate of China in Ukraine, they had come up with this great speech congratulating Ukraine on successfully resisting Russian occupation and saying that we will never attack Ukraine. But at the same time, today some news leaked that the EU has some they called weighty arguments that China is preparing to issue military and economic help to Russia. The news of the day generally is that President Biden had talked to President Xi Jinping of China, and he it's funny, even before the the call ended, China had issued a press release, and the press release was mostly conciliatory. They were saying, well, we have to find ways to keep the peace in the world. War is not good for anybody. So this is a really tame rhetoric from China, because usually they're more aggressive. They're railing against world capitalism and how everybody is not giving China the respect they deserve. So this message was really tame. Of course, this was prepared in advance because, as I said, even before the call ended, they released it. United States, as of now, had not released what's happened, but Jen Psaki did say that they did not get an impression that China is not going to meddle with Ukraine. So what's going to happen there, it's hard to say. Some Ukrainian experts are saying those two things are not contradictory. China will probably keep their word and never attack Ukraine, but they might still try to go around sanctions and do business with Russia and offer them economic help, because in this conflict it looks like China will win either way. If Russia loses, then they will benefit from Russia's weak position because they're still buying energy from them at a great discount, so it's going to be good for them. If Ukraine loses, then China's free to go after Taiwan. So they have nothing to lose in this situation, so they can use the situation to try to up their respectability in the world. So it's interesting what the United States will release regarding the conversation of Joe Biden with Xi Jinping tomorrow. So we'll take a look at that. We're seeing that the informational warfare has really taken up. Right now, it's the past 2 days was the rounds of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia is really being conniving. So you've heard the term hybrid warfare, and hybrid warfare basically means that the warfare is not only happening on the battlefield, but also it's informational, it's cyber attacks. It's misinformation, disinformation, and all of those. So disinformation is what's happening right now. So you've probably seen the term sheet that Russia had leaked to Financial Times, and Financial Times is releasing this as something they had found. But our spokespeople are saying no, this is Russia working with their correspondents or their deep throat from Watergate. So they're having their correspondents and they're leaking information to them, and this is done on purpose because they're trying to create a picture of Russia being this reasonable, rational, conciliatory state who is trying to make peace, and Ukraine is blowing it off. So the term sheet that they had leaked to Financial Times had all the crazy points in it, like demilitarization of Ukraine, Crimea is never a contested territory, it's Russian, and of course this creates an internal tension in Ukraine, because Ukrainians are looking at this and like, well, our government is willing to give away all these things, which is not true. So I think after that leaked, one of the negotiators on the Russian side came out and said, well, we're very close on many points, including we're halfway on Crimea, which basically means that Ukraine is willing to give up their claim to Crimea, which is BS. And the informational counterattack that Ukraine is doing right now, the president is doing right now, he's saying we're not giving up any of our territories, and even for it to be a ceasefire, the Russians have to go back to the positions they were on February 23rd, which means that the Crimea and the eastern parts of Ukraine will still have Russian occupation in them, but this is a starting position for any serious negotiation. So Ukrainian side, we are, I'd say we, because I'm a Ukrainian, we're counterattacking the informational war, because we're seeing that Russia is trying to use psychological pressure here to say, oh no, everything's falling apart. Even our own government is not strong enough. They're agreeing to terms which are really damaging to Ukraine. Another interesting thing, President Biden called Putin a murderous dictator and a pure thug. This is really interesting. So it can sound like he just is exasperated with Putin, which is probably true. But I think what's happening here is that the Western society, and in this case, United States in particular, they're reassigning the status of Putin from being sort of a distant ally, somebody they took as an equal, somebody they can negotiate with, to a now outsider. Which is funny, because for a lot of dictators, it's important for them to keep up the image internally for their own people, is that the world is fearing them. So, for example, as you remember, a big deal was a few years ago when Putin was was nominated to be the most influential person in the world. I think it was Time magazine who put him on a cover. And in Russia, this was great, because look at us. Russia is being respected in the world. They're being feared. Putin is being put on covers of prestigious magazine, that he's such an influential person in the world. So for dictators, for Putin, it's very important that the world respects them, and that's why he's putting out all kinds of threats to be able to keep up the image. So now what President Biden did was he set Putin aside. He put him outside of the civil democratic society. He says he's a thug. We're not taking him seriously anymore. We're gonna deal with him as a war criminal. We're gonna deal with him as a thug, which creates a really different dynamic both outside of Russia and inside of Russia. Outside of Russia is because the rhetoric is going to be different now. They're not gonna be diplomatic with Putin anymore. They're not gonna try to be on the same side of the table with him. Right now, he's an opponent. That's become very clear. And internally is because now Russian people have to make a choice, and this is a Sophie's choice indeed, if I can pervert that movie for a second, because now Russians really have to take sides. Are they siding with the civilized Western world, or are they siding with Putin? And the difficulty of the situation for like oligarchs is that they have to bet whether the Putin regime is going to stand or fall. Because if they take the wrong side, let's say they take Putin's side and his regime falls, then the entire weight of Western sanctions and isolation is going to be upon them, and they're ruined. But if they take the side opposite to Putin and his regime somehow stays in isolation, then they're going to be in trouble in Russia, and they're not going to have their riches, their lifestyle in Russia anymore. So now everybody's sort of teetering where they're going to land with this thing with Putin. And we're seeing that two of the oligarchs, the West had decided to make an example out of them. Roman Abramovich is number one. And number two, his last name is Friedman. So they've taken away all of their stuff. Friedman lives in London, and they had limited his spending to like 2,500 euros a month, and he's being all upset about that. So we're now seeing that one of the strongest oligarchs, Deripaska in Russia, he's come out on his Telegram feed, and he put out this very short political program saying basically that we need to restart Russia, we need to rethink our social institutions, and of course the implication is that this is all going to happen without Putin. So this is a really clever tactic by the United States and by President Biden to publicly put Putin aside as a thug, and now you Russians make your choice. Are you going to be on his side, or are you going to be on the side of the civilized humanity? Great move. I applaud you. With the military help, with the security help to Ukraine with 800 million, I'm seeing that more and more countries are saying that we're gonna start to be a little more discreet about how we help Ukraine and what's happening in our relationship with Ukraine. So Germany, was it 3-4 days ago, had said that we're gonna stop releasing information of what kind of armament we're supplying to Ukraine, or what's even moving on our highways, autobahns. So they had taken off those IP cameras that monitor traffic in Germany. All those have been taken offline. We're seeing that Jen Psaki is saying that we're going to release the list of things we're going to give to Ukraine this time, but there's also other things we're doing we're not going to talk about. Very smart. I think it's good to keep the opponent in the haze. One thing that we do know that's really encouraging is that the armament, the anti-air complexes that United States and Britain are supplying to us, they're shoulder mounted, which are good up to like 5-7 kilometers in distance. So you have to basically see the aircraft or see the missiles. But now it looks like Slovakia is going to give us their anti-air complex is called S-300, and S-300 are these huge trucks with mounted pipes which would shoot out serious missiles, have much longer range, and instead of to resupply Slovakia, United States are going to give them a complex that's called Patriot, which is a lot more advanced, but the same idea. They're like truck-mounted serious systems. So with S-300 that Ukraine is going to get from Slovakia, we're going to be able to. Oh, my Siri is activated. Okay, so we're going to be able to really dominate the sky and break that suppression fire we're getting, like over Mariupol. And you've probably seen the pictures in Mariupol, what's happening there, so you understand how important it is to be able to stop both the complexes or systems that launch those missiles and the missiles themselves. So good news there. Something that our president had said today is that he says we have to come to terms with the fact that Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. So this is sort of bittersweet, right? Because NATO has been teasing Ukraine on alliance with NATO or becoming a member of NATO for a number of years. That had caused Ukraine quite a bit of grief. Actually, we're in this situation because NATO is sort of teasing us about that. Maybe yes, maybe not. And President Zelensky has been frustrated in his speeches in the last month, probably saying that, well, NATO, you're telling us that the door is open to Ukraine, but we cannot walk through that door. There is no decision there. So finally, today he said something like, we have to understand and come to terms with the fact that we'll never be part of NATO, which is another point that Putin can, of course, reframe for his own internal market and say, well, now we have really won in Ukraine because we had achieved the neutrality of Ukraine, or for Ukraine to be outside of any defense alliances. Yeah, that's unfortunate. On the other hand, we're seeing that NATO has become this bloated bureaucratic organization that is unable to make any decisions. And our spokesman for defense is saying that it's not World War II anymore. There's no Churchill in Europe that's able to make historic decisions. He's saying more to that. The people who are making historical decisions in our time are in Kiev right now. So he's saying, yeah, it's a pity we cannot join NATO, but it looks like what's going to happen is that we would be able to form maybe another alliance. And this is not him saying, this is other experts that Ukraine will be part of. And Ukraine, after this war, will have the strongest army, at least in Europe, because with battle experience, with combat experience and well equipped. So any alliance that was going to be created in the future will want to have Ukraine in it. And you know, we already talked about the most economic alliance between Poland, Ukraine, and Great Britain. Looks great, but also, for example, Turkey has been our faithful ally, and that had helped us with quite a bit of things, including great drones, Bayraktar, that's been very effective in the field. So even though we cannot join NATO, it looks like we might be able to create an alliance where Ukraine would be a large part of it, which is, you know, a good alternative. As you know, I've been pretty disappointed with NATO in the last 2 weeks. Okay, and then finally there was a poll done in Russia yesterday. And the question was, do you support the special military operation in Ukraine? 71% of Russians asked said yes, they do support the war. And this is important because, you know, the question is always like, are we seeing Putin's madness, or is this like all Russians are also behind this? Do they support it? Do they think this is a good idea? Do they think this is a just war, you know, to use Augustine? And it looks like Russians do support their president, do support the war in Ukraine. So which does have far-reaching consequences, because when we talk about economic sanctions, for example, you know, you tend to think, well, Russian people are suffering because, you know, Putin is a madman and he dragged them into this. Turns out no. Turns out they want it, so it looks like they deserve it, and it also puts the pressure back on Russian people, or responsibility back on Russian people, to stop what's happening, because it looks like they're all in it together, and it's up to them to stop the war or suffer the consequences. And then finally, I'm not sure if you've seen the video of Arnold, sorry, it's 1 a.m. here. I'm a little bit groggy. Schwarzenegger recording a video for Russian people. I think it's easy to underestimate what Schwarzenegger means for Russians, because to me, I'm like, yeah, this is a great video. I thank you, Arnie, for support. But also, I remember him saying on COVID, you know, he said something like, get a vaccine and fuck your freedom, something like that. And I'm like, you know, not great. You better shut up. But what's happening here is that he understands what he means in Russia. In Russia, he's not Schwarzenegger, he's Terminator. In the 90s, when the Iron Curtain was finally lifted and the barrage of Western culture flooded into post-Soviet Union, Terminator and Terminator 2 were probably one of the first movies that became that had a cult following in Russia, and then all the subsequent movies that Arnold Schwarzenegger was in. So to many Russians, he's like an idol. So him recording this message and such a gentle tone, he's talking about his hero, who was a bodybuilder in Vlasenko, I think his last name is, who was Arnie's idol when he was only up-and-coming athlete, and how now he's saying, you know, don't listen to what they tell you. This is an unjust war. You're killing innocent people unprovoked. You provoked a peaceful nation. So this is great. I'm hoping this will start to put cracks in that Hoover Dam of Russian propaganda, of Russian regime. Who knows, though? Even though I'm not a big personal fan of Schwarzenegger, thank you. Every little bit helps. So what you're doing is great, friends. I thank you for keeping me accountable. I know when I miss a day or on a video, some of you are in my messages, direct messages, like, where's my video? What's happening? So this is what makes me record these things, even though it's 1 a.m. here. On a Saturday morning. Let's see what's happening with China. Let's see what's happening with the stalemate, and how Russia will try to circumvent their difficult situation. And hopefully we will avoid the worst scenarios and force Russia to the negotiating table, and 3 million displaced refugees can come back to Ukraine, and we will start to restore Ukraine. By the way, if you're into short-term missions, there's going to be a lot of work in Ukraine. There's going to be a lot of restoration, and not only physical restoration, but also a lot of work with people who had gone through trauma, who need a friend. There's going to be a lot of opportunities with business. Yeah, thanks, Derek, for giving me this idea. My friend Derek messaged me and said, well, after this is over, let me know. We can bring teams to restore Ukraine. This is going to be a huge field, and we're going to have a lot of work together. So I thank you for your support. Thank you for your kind words and messages and sharing my videos. I'm glad they're helpful. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.